Welcome to the deep dive. We take sources you're curious about, pull out the key bits, and basically give you the knowledge you need, fast.
And hopefully in a way that actually sticks, right?
Exactly. You're here because you want to learn efficiently, maybe see things from a couple of angles, get those aha moments without, drowning in information.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're tackling something pretty bold. We've got excerpts from Daniel S. Peña Sr.'s QLA book-second edition.pdf.
Right, the quantum leap advantage guy, QLA.
Yeah, QLA. We're digging into his core philosophy and trying to get a handle on this claim, this huge claim, that his mentees have generated over $50 billion in wealth.
50 billion. It's a number that definitely grabs your attention.
It does. So our mission today is really to understand what QLA is actually about, what might be behind that massive figure.
And also get a feel for Peña's style, which is, let's say, very direct, often provocative.
Very provocative, yeah. His take on success, business, life, it's unique.
It's about understanding those core ideas, seeing what clicks, what feels different, and, what we can maybe learn from it all.
Okay, let's start right there. $50 billion. The book calls him QLA's $50 billion man.
It's quite the title.
It is. And he says this wealth, it's come from his mentees, his devotees, through a structured program. And interestingly, he specifies not really focused on the internet, mostly since '93.
Yeah, that non-internet part is pretty specific, especially given how much the economy has changed since the mid-'90s.
Right. And even before that, back in '93, he threw down this, well, frankly, audacious challenge.
Oh, yeah, the challenge.
He basically said, look, find anyone else, any other success coach who took a tiny amount, he says $820, and turned it into like $450 million, the way he claims he did.
And if you found someone?
He said he'd quit on the spot. Not only that, he'd fly you and your family first class to see that coach's seminar, put you up in a fancy hotel, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. And he says no one took him up on it for, 2 decades?
That's what he claims.
Yeah. Well, that certainly says something about his self-belief, his conviction in his own track record anyway. It kind of sets the stage for how he approaches everything else.
Definitely. So let's dig into QLA itself. Where did it come from? Peña says back in '93, his goal was to really shake up the whole personal development scene, the PD and success business industry, as he calls it.
Right. And he quickly felt he saw a fundamental problem.
Which was?
He noticed that, people say they want success, but often there are strings attached. They want it, but, on their terms, they don't want to leave their comfort zone. And he believed that real significant change, that doesn't usually happen when you're comfortable. It comes from, massive inspiration or desperation.
Right. So he felt the industry was full of talk, but maybe not equipped for those radical shifts.
Yeah.
And that led him to develop the quantum leap advantage, QLA. What did that actually mean to him?
Well, the way he tells it, it came from looking at his own skills. He genuinely believed his abilities in public speaking, deal-making, and especially self-esteem were just way beyond what he saw elsewhere in that PD world.
So he saw himself as having a fundamental edge.
A quantum leap advantage, yeah. He felt he had something others didn't.
And he didn't just guess this.
No, he says he did his homework, spent a lot of time, a lot of money going to all sorts of PD seminars.
Okay.
And his big takeaway was that their business model, it seemed mostly about selling seats at seminars and, products, DVDs, books, whatever.
Right, selling stuff.
Yeah. He makes a specific point, actually, saying that except for Ted Nicholas at the time, he didn't see many people really focused on helping clients build actual equity, create real wealth.
So his critique was basically, they're making money for themselves, not necessarily making their clients rich.
That's the gist of it, yeah. A pretty strong accusation against the industry back then.
It is. And that brings us to the core principles of QLA. One of the first analogies he uses, and he admits it's a bit raw, is if you want to hunt with the big fucking dogs and pee in the tall grass, you must get off the porch.
Crude? Maybe. But the message is clear, isn't it?
Yeah, get out of your comfort zone. Simple as that.
He saw people stuck, maybe complaining a bit, but ultimately unwilling to take the kind of risks needed for a huge change. You got to leave the familiar behind to find the bigger opportunities. That's the idea.
Okay, another key QLA idea. Never underestimate how wrong you can be. What's that about?
I think it's about staying humble, right, and constantly learning. Even when you're sure you've got it sussed, you might be wrong. So keep looking, keep adapting.
And QLA is very results-focused.
Absolutely. He stresses that. It's about getting results, having a tough mindset. He points to his background, military, finance, the oil business.
Right.
Places where outcomes are everything, no messing about.
He also talks about this QLA insight concerning regrets, specifically regrets about not doing things. He mentions a mentee who admitted he was just too comfy.
Yeah, and another one who took an easier road and later regretted missing out on bigger chances.
So the point is...
The point is that playing it safe now, taking the easy path, might feel good short term, but it can lead to major regrets later when you look back at what could have been. He talks about the road less traveled, suggesting that avoiding the hard stuff often costs you more in the long run.
That fits with another big QLA precept. There is a massive difference between playing to win and playing not to lose. How do those actually differ?
Well, playing to win is proactive, right? You're chasing big goals, taking calculated risks, aiming high.
Okay.
Playing not to lose, that's more driven by fear of failing. So you avoid risks, you settle for less, it's reactive, defensive versus being on the attack.
And to counter that fear, he has a QLA tip. Don't fear your failures and focus on your continued application of QLA, because fear is false expectations appearing real.
Right. The acronym. He sees QLA not as some fixed dogma, but as something that evolves based on his experience, his mentees' experiences. It's a collection of best practices, constantly updated.
It sounds very practical, in a way. Don't let fear stop you. Learn from mistakes. Keep applying the principles.
Exactly. Pragmatic is a good word for it.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
Environment and role models. Peña really hammers this idea that we are the average of the 5 people we are exposed to most in our lives. How central is that to QLA?
Oh, it's huge for him. He believes who you hang around with, the conversations you have every day, they deeply shape your beliefs, what you think is possible for yourself.
And he connects it strongly to self-esteem.
Yeah, he thinks self-esteem is largely baked in during the first, 7 or 8 years of life, and your environment plays a massive role in that.
He tells this story about being at Ayers Rock in Australia.
I remember that one.
And hearing couples talking about, medical benefits, vacation time, everyday stuff.
Yeah.
And his reaction was, wow, if that's all kids hear, it really limits their horizons.
Right. He contrasts it with his own father, who he describes as having this incredibly strong work ethic.
So the point he's making is
how easily our thinking gets capped by the sort of mundane concerns of our immediate circle. Even normal conversations can accidentally set the bar really low for what's important or even possible. His dad represented a different kind of influence.
He even pulls out a Winston Churchill quote. We must do what is necessary, not just our best. What's the distinction there for Peña?
I think it's about pushing past what you think your limits are. Doing your best can sometimes be a way to let yourself off the hook, stop when it gets tough. Whereas doing what is necessary means you're focused solely on the outcome. You do whatever it takes, however hard it is, no excuses.
He also includes an email, apparently from a mother, who agrees with a Freud quote about the potentially negative impact mothers can have. That feels pretty intense.
It is intense. It underlines his belief that even loving parents might not always create the best environment for fostering a super high-performance mindset. It just shows how powerful those early influences are, for better or worse.
And this leads to another QLA tip. You basically become a derivative. His word of the actions, habits, wants, desires of the people you spend time with.
It's a stark way of putting it, but it drives home the point. Your environment shapes you deeply. If you're around driven, ambitious people, you're likely to absorb that. If you're around negativity or low expectations, well, that pulls you down too.
He mentioned something called the Castle exercise and a success test to make this more tangible. What are those about?
They sound like tools he uses to get people to really honestly evaluate their current environment. Who are you spending time with? Are they lifting you up or holding you back, especially regarding your biggest goals? It's about that critical self-assessment of your circle.
So how does QLA stand apart from other approaches? He brings up Zig Ziglar, known for mass motivation.
Right, big auditoriums, broad appeal.
And Ted Nicholas, who he respects, but sees as focused on marketing through writing. Where does Peña see QLA fitting in?
Peña positions QLA differently. It's not for the masses, really. It's aimed at a smaller group, people who are dead serious about creating major wealth, building equity, and who are prepared to make significant sacrifices to get there. It's less about general motivation, more about an intensive, hands-on strategy for building fortunes.
And part of that strategy is his directness. Speaking the absolute truth, as he calls it.
Yeah, that's fundamental to his brand. He believes in telling it like it is, even if it's harsh or uncomfortable. No sugarcoating.
He also mentions admiring Coach John Wooden and using some of his principles. How does that fit? Wooden wasn't exactly known for being abrasive.
True, their styles were different. But Wooden got incredible results through discipline, meticulous preparation, focusing on fundamentals. Peña seems to admire that relentless pursuit of excellence and effectiveness, even if he communicates it differently.
He's quite critical of people in the PD world he sees as just marketers, lacking real-world success stories themselves.
Definitely. He contrasts them with who he calls the all-time greats. Orison Swett Martin, Napoleon Hill, Jim Newman.
Why those three?
Because he sees them as people who actually achieved great things or deeply studied those who did and then distilled those principles. It's about valuing proven experience and tangible results over just theory or sales techniques.
So QLA, he says, is about creating real wealth, not just dreams, but you have to stick with it, persist.
Right. And he acknowledges the corporate world sometimes finds QLA a bit much. Too direct, maybe intimidating?
Yeah, you can imagine that.
The demanding no-excuses nature might clash with some corporate cultures, but for driven individuals, it could be exactly what they're looking for.
And he makes a point that he hasn't softened his message over the years, even if it might have made him more money.
Which suggests, a real conviction in his method. He seems committed to the results he believes it produces, even if it means not everyone likes it.
Okay, let's talk about the castle. Guthrie Castle in Scotland. He started holding his seminars there. Why?
He says it provides a more controlled, immersive environment, away from distractions. It intensifies the whole experience for people who've already made a big commitment just to be there.
And attending isn't easy, right? Requires serious emotional and financial sacrifice.
That's what he emphasizes. It acts as a filter, really. If you're willing to invest that much time, money, emotional energy, you're probably pretty serious about actually doing the work. It weeds out the tire kickers.
And then beyond the seminar, there's this year-long QLA mentorship program. It's unpaid, and he says it's incredibly demanding, requires a lot of his personal time.
Yeah, that level of involvement is pretty unusual. Being unpaid suggests his main driver isn't making money directly from the mentorship itself.
Right.
Seems more about seeing his principles succeed, building that legacy. He also mentions getting personally involved in his mentees' deals, which is far beyond what most coaches would do. Very hands-on.
Let's look at some examples he gives. He mentions a 23-year-old in Australia, used QLA, got major funding from a big financial institution, even though he didn't own any property.
That's a powerful story, isn't it? It suggests QLA helped him bypass traditional hurdles. We don't know all the details, but it sounds like he used the mindset, the strategy, to present a really compelling case.
Then there's an 18-year-old mentee still in high school, and a 48-year-old in the UK who apparently built up $13 million in revenue with no cash out of pocket, just using QLA stuff he learned from Peña's products.
$13 million, no cash down. That highlights the potential impact even just from studying the materials, assuming the story holds. It points towards mastering deal structures or other core QLA tactics.
He also talks about two young guys in Australia grew and entered a business to mid-seven figures. But then, interestingly, he includes a quote from Donald Trump saying, most people who go to seminars don't actually succeed.
Yeah, why include that? I think it backs up Peña's own point. Just showing up isn't enough.
Right.
Success takes relentless application, hard work, a real shift in thinking. Something many attendees maybe aren't ready for.
He shares snippets from mentee reports showing persistence paying off. And he talks about who comes to the Castle seminars' really diverse backgrounds. A skier, a physicist, a former 7-Eleven gas station worker.
And apparently the gas station worker was one of the most successful.
That's what he implies, yeah. He even says someone world-renowned in their own field is coming to a future seminar. What does that mix tell us?
It suggests the appeal isn't limited to one type of person or industry. The principles might be transferable. And if someone already at the top of their game is interested, it implies QLA might offer something even for high achievers.
So why does Peña keep doing it? The coaching, the mentoring?
He says he just genuinely enjoys it, helping people achieve more than they believe they could.
That intrinsic motivation.
Seems like it. It's often a driver for people who've already achieved a lot themselves, a way to give back, maybe, using the system he built.
He mentions his own goals are evolving, he wants to do more, compares himself in a way to Elon Musk, someone always pushing.
Yeah, that comparison points to a mindset of never settling, always aiming higher. Reaching the $50 billion claim hasn't stopped him. He talks about still discovering successful mentees.
And he's created a QLA Hall of Fame at the Castle.
Right, a physical testament to those successes, inspiration for others, perhaps.
He often contrasts these QLA results with what he sees as a lack of results in the wider PD or success industry. He tells an anecdote about the Harvard Club.
Yeah, the point he's making there is that QLA is different, and in his view, way more effective at producing actual wealth than mainstream approaches. The Harvard Club story probably contrasts traditional markers of success with the rapid wealth creation he links to QLA.
He mentions an upcoming seminar in April, so for listeners who are intrigued...
That would be the direct route to experience it firsthand, presumably.
Okay, wrapping up, he lists key points about the damn Peña brand. The $50 billion claim, his own barrio to the castle journey, the deal-making experience, the free mentorship. What's the final takeaway message he wants to leave?
I think it boils down to possibility. Look, if someone from his background, without the fancy Ivy League degree, can help others achieve such massive results.
Then what's possible for you?
Exactly. The implication is that you, the listener, regardless of where you are now, also have the potential for something extraordinary.
So as we finish this deep dive into Daniel Peña and QLA, a few things really stand out. Obviously, that $50 billion claim, it's huge. It's central.
Definitely. And we've touched on where QLA came from, his critique of the PD world, those core ideas like, get uncomfortable, be tough-minded, watch your environment.
Right. And the focus on mentorship, how demanding his programs are, plus those examples he uses to show it working. It's certainly a unique perspective, often challenging.
It makes you think, doesn't it? About your own goals, how much risk you take, who you listen to.
Absolutely. Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Peña essentially asks, if he could do what he did, coming from where he came from, and help others achieve so much, what could you do? If the usual paths aren't getting you where you want to go, what bold step, maybe an uncomfortable one, might you need to take for your own quantum leap? What tall grass, as he puts it, are you ready to step into?